we are in Acts 22. Acts chapter 22. I want to draw your attention real quickly to chapter 24. Chapter 24, verse 11. Now, we're not there yet. We're getting there. But in Acts chapter 24, verse 11, Paul says, "It was just 12 days ago that I entered Jerusalem." He entered Jerusalem in Acts 21, verse 17. So between Acts 21, verse 17, through the end of chapter 23 is 12 days. And so he would have said, it's been 12 days, meaning today's day 13. So that's something to keep in mind. The longest day, well, let me rephrase that. The most information we have on any one of those days is today. So we're here in Acts chapter 22. Acts chapter 22, that day started back in 21, verse 27. This is day 9. And it's interesting that Luke will then give us a final count. And we'll talk more about that. What happened on days 3 through 9? So day 1, he arrives. Day 2, he meets with the Jerusalem elders. Days 3 through 9, he's taking that vow. So no information is recorded for several days until day 9, when somebody says, "Hey, that's Paul, the troublemaker. And he took a Greek into the temple." And that's all on this day, all part of this day that we have started and continuing in verse 22. So let's start taking a look. We saw how Paul was speaking to them in 2 different languages last week. We saw that Paul spoke with the tribune, and we do know his name. We're not told right now, but we'll look at it later, where Paul is speaking to him, and he says, "You know Greek?" And Paul speaks to him in Greek. Then, when he is given an opportunity to address the very crowd that was trying to kill him, the big crowd of Jews, he addressed them in the Hebrew language. And I asked last week, is there anyone here who can speak English just as well as some other language, i.e. Spanish? And there's a handful of you who can do just that. My 7-year-old grandson can do that, so how hard can it be? Boy, I wish I had learned a language when I was a kid, because it sure is hard now, isn't it? So here is, in yellow, the first verse of chapter 22, verse 1. If you're on a Bible reading program that reads a chapter a day, when you come to Acts chapter 21, it's going to leave you hanging, because it ends with Paul addressing them in the Hebrew language, saying, and that's the end of the chapter. But I went ahead and put on the screen the first verse of chapter 22, because it goes right into it. Day 9, still part of this crazy day where people tried to kill Paul. And that's what we're looking at right now. I want to mention to you the importance of the fortress of Antonia. This is a huge structure built on the grounds of Herod the Great's temple. So Herod the Great was king of Judea and Samaria, Galilee, Idumea, a big chunk of that area of land. When he died, it was divided up among his sons. But Herod was a king, and who made him king? The Roman Empire did. You remember Marc Antony, Augustus. Herod was half Jew, half Edomite, Idumean, and he grew up with those guys. He was a Jew living in Rome, being educated, and they said, "Hey, we want Herod to take care of this troublesome area after we conquer it." So Herod the Great was buddies with the emperor himself, Augustus. He named Caesarea after his buddy, Caesar Augustus. And Rome rules Judea, but they use Herod, the local king, to really govern. But they built this fortress because they knew Jerusalem, specifically the temple, could cause some problems, because there's a lot of controversy here. That structure, the Antonia Fortress, has 4 corners. You see that tallest one right there? That is equivalent to an 8-story tall building. This is quite a feat of architecture. Speaking of architecture, here comes Shane. That right there, Shane, that tallest tower is 8 stories. What do you think they kept in the fortress of Antonia? What do you think? I mean, do they have some room for storage? They got a prison. They got a prison area, and that's where Paul was, the barracks. He was in the prison. They've got soldiers galore. They've got workout equipment, shooting range. You know, they got all kinds of stuff here in this fortress of Antonia. That would be a great study in and of itself, a documentary on the fortress of Antonia. So when the tribune sees trouble, he's able to say, hey guys, go out there and take care of it. And that's why the Roman soldiers came out of nowhere when the folks were trying to tear Paul apart in the previous chapter. Yes, sir?
I'm curious why this was built on the temple grounds. Why wasn't it built on other grounds and not religious?
Well, at the temple grounds, there's more than just religious rooms. This is a community center. And Herod the Great, who was a builder, I mean, he loved to build stuff. This place is huge. And I would dare say this is just a small percentage of the entire temple grounds. I don't have an image to show you, but they're out there. But this is a formidable fortress. And it's housing a bunch of people who were able to come in here. I don't know how historically accurate this is, but this is supposed to be Paul standing from the fortress of Antonia, high up above the people who were trying to kill him. So he's speaking to them, and he's speaking to them in their language. Something else I want to mention to you as we look at his speech in Acts 22, it uses the verb or noun for witness or testimony 5 times. Now, some of them are obscured. A couple of them are obscured in our English translation. But you can see in chapter 22, verse 5, and they're all not just about Paul bearing witness. It's also about the reputation of Ananias, the person who baptized him. The noun, Jesus, or Ananias is telling Paul, you will be a witness for Jesus, Acts 22, verse 15. And then 2 more. Paul is recounting Jesus telling him, they will not accept your testimony about me. We'll look at that here in just a few minutes. And then Jesus is talking to Paul, and this is what Paul says, when the blood of Stephen, your witness, talking to Jesus. So we'll point those out as we go through them. I think that's telling us something about his message here. And that we're going to divide up this section into 5 parts. We probably could have combined one of these. Notice the yellow text, Acts 9 references. These aren't parallel per se, but Paul is going to recount his conversion here in Acts 22. And you can read the so-called parallel account in Acts 9. And you remember this also. When Paul is speaking before Agrippa II in chapter 26, that will be a 3rd time that Paul's conversion, his appearance, Jesus' appearance to him, will be recounted. 3 times. What does that tell you about Jesus' appearance to Paul on the road to Damascus from Jerusalem. It's pretty important. This is a turning point in Paul's life. Yes, sir.
Another reason I think maybe is Paul was not one of the regular apostles, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. He was out of due season. And so, having listed it 3 times might have helped his credibility.
Absolutely. And Luke is well aware of that. So it's repeated three times. There's one other event that is repeated 3 times in the book of Acts. Do you remember what that is? It was the conversion of Cornelius. In Acts 10, Acts 11, almost verbatim from chapter 10, and then chapter 15. What does that tell you about the conversion of Cornelius and his household? That also is a watershed moment in the book of Acts. Okay, so Paul defends his Jewish faithfulness. What is the accusation that has been levied against Paul? What they said about him in the riot of chapter 21, the accusation that was made is that he is teaching everyone everywhere against the people, the Jewish people, and the law of Moses, and this place, the temple. That's the accusation. And then they say further, he brought Greeks into the temple, which is a big no-no. Was Paul doing any of this? Was Paul teaching everyone, was he bad-mouthing his Jewish heritage? No. Was he speaking against the Mosaic law? From one perspective, you might say, well, yeah, because he's saying it's been fulfilled in Jesus. But that's a good thing. And this place, this temple, no, he's not doing any of those, and he certainly did not bring a Gentile into the temple. You remember that there's the area where people could be outside the temple, the court of the Gentiles. Anybody and everybody could be in there. Then there were a little closer in the court of the women, where the Jewish women could be. But then once you go beyond that, only Jewish men who are well physically, they can go into the temple. You remember that fellow in Acts 3, the cripple who begged outside the temple? He couldn't go in the temple. No one could take him in because that was forbidden. Well, once he is healed, all that changes. So there's a lot going on here, and I want us to look at the first 3 verses. Brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you. And when they heard that he was addressing them in the Hebrew language, Aramaic, they became even more quiet. He said, I am a Jew in Tarsus, born in Tarsus in Cilicia, brought up in this city, Jerusalem, educated at the feet of Gamaliel, according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers, being zealous for God, as all of you are this day. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering to prison both men and women, as the high priest and the whole council of elders. Listen to this. The high priest and the elders of the people can bear me witness. They can testify on my behalf that I was indeed zealous for the law. From them I received letters to the brothers, and I journeyed toward Damascus to take those also who were there and bring them in bonds to Jerusalem to be punished. Does all this sound familiar to us? We remember this, Acts 9. Paul trying to got letters to go from Jerusalem to Damascus, find any who belong to the way, and bind them, bring them back to Jerusalem to stand trial. So what is Paul accomplishing in these verses here? What is he trying to convey to his Jewish audience who were very zealous for the law?
So a lot of parallels here in my mind with the speech Stephen gave.
Yes, sir. That is exactly right.
We have in common. We are brothers. And then he lays out we have a lot of common beliefs and then gets into...
Okay, so since you bring up Stephen, you remember how we saw this. your servant Stephen. That's part of Paul's speech. He brings up Stephen, who was killed. I had it in my head how long ago it was. This is probably AD 57. Stephen's death would have been about AD 33, 34. So how many years ago would that have been? 57 minus 33. It's been over 20 years since the death of Stephen, and he's bringing it up. So let's tuck that away as well. And so what Glenn just said is that there's some interesting parallels maybe between Stephen's speech in Acts 7 and Paul's speech. And I would say yes, that is indeed true. At least some parallels between their situations, which I don't really go into this morning, but that is exactly right. So he's talking to them about his recent past. And then he starts saying in verse 4, well, I wasn't a disciple of Jesus from the beginning. I became a disciple of Jesus. It didn't start out that way. And so, yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from. I was on your side. But how do you think that makes the high priests and the elders of the people feel now about Paul? Do you think some of them still remembered him from 20 plus years ago? Of course. They knew who this guy was. And so Paul is trying to address the accusations, but indirectly. He's saying, let me tell you about what I was. And in a little while, in chapter 23, he is going to say, not I was a Pharisee. He says, I am a Pharisee. I find that interesting as well. So Paul defends his Jewish faithfulness to the law. And the events that he talks about, we can see them in Acts 9, verses 1 and 2. All right, Paul recounts his encounter with Jesus. So we're up to the point where Paul's ready to go to Damascus. He's on his way, and what happens? So let's read verses 6 through 8. As I was on my way and drew near to Damascus, about noon, a great light from heaven suddenly shone around me, and I fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And I answered, Who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. We'll pause there for just a moment. As you look at Acts 9, Acts 22, and Acts 26, there are some details that repeat. There are some added details, and I'll point this one out to you. Neither Acts 9 nor Acts 26 say Jesus of Nazareth, but this one does. So Paul is filling in that little detail. There are some overlaps. People who want to nitpick, they'll say, oh, there's a contradiction here. We'll talk about one of those big ones here in just a moment. But we all remember this scene. We knew it before we studied it in Acts 9 a year ago. and here we are now looking at Paul recounting this. Jesus doesn't say, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Why do you think he repeats his name twice? What effect is that? Emphasis. I'm talking to you, buddy. Were there other people with Paul? Oh, yeah. And he'll talk about them here. In fact, we'll go ahead and look at those verses now. So finishing this section, it says, now those who were with me, remember, he's got an entourage. He's going to Damascus. He's got letters. He represents the high priest. Now those who were with me saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking to me. There in verse 9. Do you have a different translation than hear the voice? Understand. Okay, it is literally the verb to hear. but it is being correctly explained to us. They didn't understand what the voice was saying. Something similar happened with Jesus in John's gospel, and I mentioned this in the notes that are out in the foyer on either side here. And what it tells us is one time God spoke to Jesus. Jesus said, "Magnify your name," and then God thunders, "I have magnified it, and I will." And there were people there who said, "Oh, that was an angel," and other people said, "No, it was just thunder." They didn't understand the words, but they heard something. And so they hear a voice, but they don't hear it. They hear it, but they don't hear it. They see the light, maybe not as intensely as Paul did, doesn't go into detail about that. Now, those who were with me saw the light, but did not hear. They did not understand the voice who was speaking to me. In fact, let me go back to Acts 9 for just a moment and compare that. Who are you, Lord? Acts chapter 9, verse 5. I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. And then Jesus tells them to go into the city. The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one. So Paul's contradicting this. Hearing the voice in Acts 9, verse 7, and then in Acts 22, they didn't hear the voice. Well, they didn't understand the voice. They heard something. They knew somebody was talking maybe, but they didn't understand it. This is not a message for anyone except the Apostle Paul, and he knows it. This is being spoken to him, and he makes that very plain. And the Lord said to me, "Rise and go into Damascus." I mean, you're almost there anyway. "And there you will be told all that is appointed for you to do." What does that mean? Appointed for you to do.
He was destined early, and it was already set, but he didn't know it.
That's exactly right. You remember in Galatians, Paul says, and I think he's channeling Jeremiah, I was called from my mother's womb. This is what I was born to do, to preach the gospel for Jesus. I didn't know it. And here in Acts 22, so if this is 20, how many years did we say? 23, 24 years ago? Paul was a young man. That's what he's called back in Acts 9. He's a young man. Maybe in his 20s, late 20s, early 30s. Probably not in his 30s. Sure would be nice if we knew his age. But be that as it may, this is a long time ago. He's been preaching the gospel a long time now. And this light is so bright. How bright was it? What effect did it have on him? All right, it blinded him. Now, we mentioned this a long time ago when we studied Acts 9. There are several parallels between Paul seeing Jesus and the servant passage in Isaiah 49. In Isaiah 49, Israel is called God's servant, the nation of Israel. And they were supposed to be a light to the Gentiles as well as to themselves. They were to show everybody what it means to be in a covenant relationship with God. But Isaiah says, you didn't do it. You were a blind servant. Isaiah permeates the book of Acts, and so I will say now what I said then. In the background of this passage is Isaiah 49. And the better we know those passages, the better we're going to see right here in Acts 22 the channeling of the blind servant. Isaiah and his discussion about the blind servant who is supposed to be a light to the Gentiles, well, that finds its fulfillment in Paul as well. Now, by the way, who was the perfect servant that Isaiah 42, 49, 53, Jesus. So Jesus, was he blind? No. Was he mistaken? Was he unable to fulfill the mission that God had given him? Absolutely not. But that's in contrast to ancient Israel, and that's in contrast to Paul at first. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? So in that moment, when Paul saw and heard Jesus speaking to him, what instantly, just in that moment, did Paul have to confront about his views and about his life? He's wrong. Now hold on a second. Hold on. In Acts 23, verse 1, Paul is going to say, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day. How could he say that if he was persecuting Christians? He was wrong. Okay, he believed he was right. And we'll look at that next week. So here we go. Rise and go into Damascus. You'll be told what has been appointed for you to do. And that was to go to the street called Straight, the Straight Street, and Ananias was going to come and find him. And since I could not see, Paul says, because of the brightness of the light, I was led by those who were with me and came into Damascus. All this makes sense. We remember all of this. And Paul is recounting this. Now, how many times has Paul said something that probably makes his audience a little uncomfortable? Just through verse 11 here. I mean, this alone, the appearance of Jesus to him, is going to make them groan. Oh, come on, give me a break. But do they interrupt him? No, we don't have any record of that. So Paul has just recounted his encounter with Jesus, and now he's going to describe Ananias coming to him. And that's in verses 12 through 16. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, listen to this, well spoken of. He is well witnessed by all the Jews who live there. I don't know if there's a big significance to the 5 uses of witness or testimony here in his speech, but that is a lot within just a few verses, from verse 5 down through verse 20. It's used 5 times. This is another example of that. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, well spoken of by the Jews, by all the Jews who lived there in Damascus. Well, this guy Ananias, he came to me and standing by me and said, Brother Saul, receive your sight. Now, when he says Brother Saul, does he mean, hey, you're a fellow Christian? That's how Jews addressed each other. Brother. He's talking to him as a fellow Jew, I think. At that very hour, I received my sight and saw him. So he's now got his sight restored. The first miracle, besides Jesus appearing to him, was he was blinded. The second miracle is he's able to see. And we remember that there was something like scales on his eyes. That's from Acts 9. They came off and he was able to see. So I'm sure that was a big comfort to him. Hearing a friendly voice say, Brother Saul, receive your sight, was probably really helpful. And this is what Ananias said to him. Sent by Jesus himself, Ananias said, the God of our fathers appointed, Paul just used that word, that he was to go to Damascus for what he was appointed to do. Well, here's what you're appointed to do. The God of our fathers appointed you to know his will. Listen to this. To see the righteous one and hear a voice from my mouth. For you will be, here's the third time, a witness for him to everyone of what you have seen and heard. All right, so what is Paul's job? What is he supposed to do from here on out? Preach about this event. Preach about this moment and its implication. Jesus is alive. Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ, the fulfillment of the Old Testament scriptures. Isn't that what he does anywhere and everywhere he goes? He goes into a synagogue, and what does he do? He opens the scriptures. The Thessalonians rejected it in Acts 17, and then in contrast with them, the Bereans were more open-minded. They opened the scriptures to see if what Paul was saying was really true. That's Paul's purpose. Wouldn't you love to have a purpose like that in your mind, where you know why you are here on the planet? Ma'am? Isn't that to preach the gospel? Sure. Absolutely. So are you planning on going to Ethiopia next week? Sure, the church will gladly buy you the plane ticket. Send you over there. We'll talk about that another time. But yeah, I thought maybe you were asking because I couldn't quite hear what you said. I heard a voice, but I didn't understand it. Actually, I was just ignoring it. I thought you were saying, don't we all want to know what our purpose is? And she's saying, well, our purpose is to proclaim Jesus, and that is certainly true. How many of you know with certainty why you were put here on planet Earth? How many of you know what your job is? Isn't that a great feeling? To have what is it that we're supposed to have in life? Someone something to eat, somewhere to live, and someone to love. That's how they break down our human existence. But there's more to it than that, of course. To know your purpose. Do we always have the same purpose throughout life? Sometimes that changes. I think that's important for us. For Paul, it was what drove him. Do you think he ever felt bad about the persecution of Christians in his early days? I know he did. And I'm sure that motivated him as well. All right, Acts 22, verse 16, I think is a very important verse. Ananias asks Saul of Tarsus at the time, "And now why do you wait? Rise and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on his name." Why do we especially think that is such an important verse? What does it say about baptism? That it's for the remission of sins. Water going down into a baptistry or a pool of water, rising up out, it sure seems to be suggesting that. Now, if that was the only verse in the New Testament that said such a thing, we might go, well, maybe it's symbolic. But what do you have in Acts 2, verse 38? Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ, for the remission of your sins. Why do we even emphasize this right now? Because what do most people in the denominational world believe? What do most people in the world believe about baptism? Is it necessary for salvation, according to them? Then they would say no. Is it a good thing to do? Is it a wonderful thing to do?
You can schedule it anytime, maybe next year.
Okay, yeah, we'll just schedule the time so we don't have to keep refilling this baptistry and all of that. What this is showing us is that baptism is part of salvation. And Paul is washing away his sins, calling on his name. He also receives the Holy Spirit. And interestingly, it's before his baptism, kind of like with Cornelius in his household. Verse 16, I think, is very important as Paul is describing his baptism by Ananias. We've got one more parallel here with Acts 9 in verses 17 through 21. So these verses, again, should be very familiar to you. And the term testimony in verse 18 and witness in verse 20 are the fourth and fifth examples of this concept of testimony or witness. Verse 17 through 21. When I had returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple. Why is that important for Paul's audience to hear? Hey, I came back to Jerusalem. I went in the temple and prayed. Because what was the accusation they had just made? Oh, he's speaking against this place, this temple. Well, he certainly didn't then. I fell into a trance and saw him saying to me. So he's having a conversation with Jesus. Make haste and get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your testimony. There's that word, testimony, about me. You know, Paul, as a young man, was going to Damascus. He becomes a Christian. He comes back to Jerusalem. He's praying in the temple, and Jesus appears to him and says, get out of Dodge now. And you know what Paul does? What does Paul do? He starts arguing with Jesus. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of this, but this is what his response is. Lord, they themselves know that in one synagogue after another I imprisoned and beat those who believed in you. And when the blood of Stephen, your witness, was being shed, there's that fifth time, witness, I myself was standing by and approving and watching over the garments of those who killed him. What is Paul saying to Jesus? No. You don't understand. They will accept my testimony because I'm one of them. And Jesus says, get out of Jerusalem, you idiot. Okay, Jesus didn't say that exactly. Go, for I will send you far away to the, here's the G word, Gentiles. So isn't this a little humorous, perhaps? But what is Paul saying? And this is all part of his declaration on this moment, in this moment, on this day. I'm one of you. Now, I have seen the resurrected Lord. I now understand he is alive. And I'm telling you, he's alive. I'm giving you my eyewitness testimony. And Jesus said, you guys aren't going to listen, but here I am. I'm in Jerusalem over 20 years later, and I'm here with the same message. I'm one of you, and Jesus is the Messiah. And he said to them, let me tell you what else Jesus said to me. Go, for I will send you away to the Gentiles. Look at verse 22. Benjamin, what happens in verse 22? Acts 22, verse 22, what does it say? All right. Give me the first part of verse 22. Okay. What does that mean? They listened to him up to this statement. By the way, congratulations on your graduation and starting your new work at Southside in Pasadena with Bubba Garner. Close second. Oh boy, I'm excited for you. Very excited for you. So what in the world does it mean? They listened to him up to this point. What is the implication of that?
It's not listening after that?
Yes. So it means they did listen to him talk about Jesus appearing to him. Do you think they were accepting of that? Going, yeah. No, I don't think they believed it. I don't think they wanted to acknowledge it. But at least they didn't interrupt him. When do they interrupt him? When he starts talking about Gentiles. What was the big issue? Oh, I saw Paul bring Trophimus the Ephesian into the temple. That was the accusation in Acts 21. They don't like Gentiles. In case you didn't know that, Jews and Gentiles did not get along in the first century. Just a heads up. Yeah, we all know that. So we come into the last section here where the crowd goes crazy and we are introduced to the tribune. Or no, we're not introduced to him here. We saw him back in 21. So the tribune has to get back into the action. All right, and we've just got a few minutes left. We may not quite finish these verses, but at least we can do through verse 24. Up to this word, they listened to him. Then they raised their voices and said, "Away with such a fellow from the earth!" So the volatility that they had raised to the level of in chapter 21, here it is again. These folks, it's the same day, it's the same occasion. They are livid that he would dare to say he was commissioned by God to go preach to what? The Gentiles? He should not be allowed to live. Yes, sir.
They must not read the Old Testament very closely.
That's right. They didn't read the Old Testament very closely. And they were too busy shouting and, listen to this, throwing off their cloaks, flinging dust in the air. I brought some dirt here with me, and I'm going to throw it just to show you. Okay, no dirt. The tribune. So here's the tribune again. And so the tribune thinks this is going to be a good thing. He thinks this is going to be, Paul's going to get up there. He's going to speak to these folks. I'm one of them. I can talk to them. And wow, this is going great. Everything's super. And the tribune's going, yeah, this is good. All right. Oh, no. Oh, no. And he got to get the soldiers back in there. So the tribune ordered him to be brought into the barracks. So who's he mad at right now? He's mad at Paul, saying that he should be examined by asking him a few questions. Yeah, we're going to ask him some questions while we flog him to find out why they were shouting against him like this. They're going to rough Paul up. Okay, something I want to emphasize as we move into this section of Acts. Really, it started in Acts 19, verse 21, but here, after Paul gets to Jerusalem, it's not about traveling from city to city preaching the gospel. It is about Paul as a prisoner. He has been arrested by the tribune, and it is now about Paul going from courtroom to courtroom. It is different than everything else we've read in Acts, and in its own way, it's really exciting. So as we've kind of piecemealed this, we've just read this speech of Paul. I don't want us to lose sight of the sudden outburst and these people flinging dirt, taking off their garments. What are they wanting to do with their garments taken off? They want it, Paul. They want to get at him and tear him apart. And you can't really do that in a suit jacket or something. You know. They're just livid with Paul. Well, they can't get to him, but the tribune can. And so he says, well, we're going to find out what's going on by flogging him. And that's when the centurion gets involved. So let's just read verses 25 through 27. We just got a couple minutes left. But when they had stretched him out for the whips, I mean, they're serious about this. Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, "Hey, is it lawful for you to flog a man who is a Roman citizen and uncondemned?" When the centurion heard this, he went to the tribune and said, "Hey, boss, do you realize what you're about to do? This man is a Roman citizen." And the tribune said, uh-oh. Because why? What would have happened if he had flogged a true Roman citizen? Who would have gotten in trouble then? The tribune. From then on, he is going to treat Paul with kid gloves. And that's where we're going to pick up next week. I don't have the material out. Right now, you were telling me, wow, you got 4 pages for your lessons. This one right now is 8 pages. And I need to figure out what I'm going to do. But it is so exciting. And what we're going to be covering next week is the plot to kill Paul and all of chapter 23. We're going to get him to Caesarea. And so I hope you'll just pick up right here and read the rest of Acts and just be excited by the drama that unfolds right here in our Bibles and see who is the one who is directing it all. It looks like chaos, but who is the one who is calmly and carefully directing it. Jesus, God. And that's what our lesson this Wednesday is going to be about, and I think we'll be able to connect well with it. When life is super, super crazy, does that mean God's no longer in the picture? When everything's going on in your life? I mean, isn't that how it happens? You have one thing happen, and then another thing happen. Let me rephrase that because I'm trying to hurry. You have nothing going on, and then all of a sudden everything happens. You ever experienced that? That means God is not in the picture. God says, well, that's just too much for me. Now, I would dare say he is able to be relied on in the moments of chaos, and that's what we'll talk about Wednesday night. All right, thank you. Thank you for studying this passage with me.